They tried to trade the alien princess, but a human battleship declared her priceless. The galaxy had long treated her as if she were a mere commodity, a bargaining chip to be passed across tables drenched in political blood, but to the humans aboard Earth's only battleship she was not a prize, not a tool, and certainly not a possession. She was the alien princess, a being whose very existence carried the weight of empires and whose capture had set off a frenzy of trade, betrayal, and ambition. And the first chapter of her fate began on a bleak station orbiting a nameless moon, where a dozen warlords gathered to decide what her life was worth, with fleets hanging silent in orbit like vultures awaiting a carcass, their captains believing that the princess's DNA, heritage, and claim to her fractured throne could be traded as easily as ore or spice. Yet no one among them understood that humans, those strange latecomers to the galactic stage, were watching with quiet intensity, unwilling to let such arrogance go unanswered. The hall where she was kept was carved into the heart of the station's black alloy shell, its walls lined with flickering banners of warlords and syndicates, a display of power meant to remind her that she was powerless. Yet the alien princess did not bow her head, her silver-blue skin catching the light of torches as though woven with starlight, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of fury and sorrow, for she had been raised on stories of her people's greatness, of her ancestors who once ruled, not through cruelty but through harmony across 10,000 systems, until betrayal shattered their empire and left her as the last living heir. And now these men and women who called themselves leaders debated whether to sell her to the bioengineers of the Zeth Consortium, to the slave pits of the Obek lords, or to the auction blocks where empires would bid not for her freedom but for the power to control her bloodline, and each offer carried promises of fleets, weapons, or credits as though her life could be reduced to numbers on a screen. She sat bound in chains of plasma filament, glowing faintly as though they burned her wrists, but she did not cry out. Instead she raised her chin and met their gazes, her silence cutting deeper than words, because every eye in the chamber knew she was no mere token, she was a symbol. And if they sold her, then the galaxy itself would learn that honor could be traded away without shame. In the shadows of that hall, a single human envoy stood among the delegates, not tall nor adorned with finery like the others, his uniform plain gray with the crest of Earth's navy etched upon his chest, and though they mocked him, called humanity a backward world with one ship to its name, he did not flinch, for his people had sent him not to bid for her as others did, but to watch, to measure, and to carry back word to the captain of Earth's only battleship, the dread vessel Resolute. He listened to the jeers, the laughter, the arguments over her price, and he thought of the faces of his crewmates who had sworn never to allow tyranny to stand unchallenged, and he thought of the captain who had once said that humanity had nothing left to prove except that it would not bow to monsters. When the warlords finally reached a fever pitch, shouting over each other about who had the right to claim her, the princess's voice rose above them, clear and steady, and she said, "I am not a possession. I will not be sold." Her words silenced the chamber for an instant, before laughter broke out like thunder, cruel and mocking, as if her defiance only made her more amusing to them, but the human envoy's eyes sharpened, and in that moment he activated the hidden beacon within his sleeve, a pulse that shot silently through the void and across the gulf to the Resolute, where deep in the dark of space the engines roared to life. On the bridge of the battleship, Captain Elias Ward received the signal, his scarred face unreadable as he stared at the projection of the warlord's fleets encircling the station, and though his crew looked uneasy at the prospect of facing dozens of ships with only their lone vessel, he said calmly, "Prepare for engagement. She will not be traded. Not while we live." The Resolute had been mocked for years, dismissed as Earth's desperate attempt to prove it belonged among the stars, but those who sneered did not know what lay within its hull, because humans, in their solitude and determination, had built something different, something terrifying, a ship designed not to conquer but to endure, with systems unlike any seen before, weapons that seemed to drink light itself, and shields woven with technologies reverse-engineered from ruins the galaxy had long ignored. And as the engines burned brighter than suns, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. Back on the station, the warlords were startled when alarms blared, reports flashing across their screens that an unknown vessel was approaching, and at first they scoffed, thinking it was another scavenger ship, until the silhouette appeared, a vast and angular beast of black steel etched with the emblem of Earth, cutting through space like a blade through water. And when the name Resolute appeared on their sensors, laughter filled the hall again, but this time it was tinged with disbelief, for surely no human vessel would dare stand against such overwhelming force. The alien princess, though still bound, turned her head slightly, her eyes catching the projection of that lone ship, and for the first time since her capture a faint glimmer of hope stirred within her chest. Not because she believed the humans could win, but because they dared to arrive at all, to stand where others only bargained. The envoy stepped forward and declared, his voice firm enough to carry over the noise, "On behalf of Earth I say this, the princess is not for sale. She is not your property. If you seek to trade her, you will answer to us." The warlords roared with laughter once more, calling him insane, suicidal, pathetic, but even as their voices rose, the space outside grew silent, every crew aboard every ship staring at the approaching battleship as its weapons came online, charging with a hum that resonated like the heartbeat of a god. And in that silence the galaxy shifted, because for the first time the predators who thought themselves untouchable were forced to wonder whether humanity, with its single battleship and stubborn defiance, was about to teach them what priceless truly meant. And so the first chapter closed not with the alien princess being sold to the highest bidder, but with the shadow of the Resolute falling over the station, its guns locked, its shields alive, and its crew ready to stake everything on one belief: that some lives could not be measured in trade, that some beings could not be reduced to currency, and that humanity's one ship would stand against an empire if that was what it took. The chamber was suffocating with tension as the alien princess stood on the dais, the soft blue glow of containment fields casting a pale shimmer over her delicate features. And though the Trade Council thought her bound, she carried herself with an air that no chains or contracts could suppress. But outside the great hall, far beyond the gilded arches and echoing floors of the alien market world, the looming silhouette of Earth's flagship, the dreadnought Resolute, hung in orbit like a blade drawn in defiance, its presence a shadow over every negotiation. And when the emissaries of empires spoke of value, bargaining rights, and exchange protocols, their voices faltered with the unspoken reminder that one ship, just one, carried the weight of a species unwilling to bow to commerce when dignity was at stake. For Commander Elias Ward had made his stance clear. The alien princess was not a commodity, not a relic of power to be shuffled across ledgers, but someone worthy of protection. And though his fleet was smaller, though humanity's claim to galactic recognition was fragile and contested, his voice thundered louder than all, amplified not by authority granted from treaties but by conviction that made even the most ruthless negotiators hesitate. Yet inside the chamber the bidding had already begun, alien factions calling out their offers with currencies that shimmered in light and weight, precious metals, weapons of devastating capacity, entire worlds promised as dowry, each louder than the last, and she, standing motionless, watched with a mixture of dread and a strange spark of hope. For though her heart had been trained by captivity to never expect salvation, she knew that outside this hall a human battleship's guns were locked, its crew standing at battle stations, its captain ready to unleash hell not for profit but for principle. And this knowledge made her spine straighten though her wrists bore restraints. It made her eyes hold steady against the predators who believed she was helpless. And soon whispers began to ripple through the crowd, for from the walls came the low rumble of a comms transmission, unauthorized, uninvited, but broadcast across every ear in the council hall, and the voice was Elias Ward's, steady, unshaken, a voice that carried through the static like iron across velvet. "She is not for sale, she is not for barter, she is not yours to trade, she is under the protection of Earth, and should you attempt to finalize this market you will not be negotiating with buyers and sellers, you will be negotiating with the fire of our guns." And silence fell, a silence so vast that even the hum of containment fields seemed to recede, until one alien warlord, massive and scaled in plates of red armor, snarled that humanity had no right, that Earth was weak, fledgling, naive, and that no ship could dictate terms to an empire that spanned 1,000 systems. But before his words could gather strength the chamber's walls shook, the skies above the city lit as the Resolute lowered in orbit until it hovered visibly through the ceiling's transparent dome, its mass blocking the light of the local star, and with it came squadrons of escort craft, aligned in formation, silent yet undeniable. And the council realized in that moment that humans did not posture with words alone. Their ships were not polished trophies for display, they were war machines designed to endure, to strike, to refuse compromise when conscience was violated. And as targeting systems quietly pinged the ground defenses of the planet, 1,000 blinking lights on tactical screens reminded everyone present that this was no bluff, and fear, raw and unfiltered, bled into the once arrogant crowd. Yet the alien princess did not tremble, instead her eyes softened, for she understood now why humanity was whispered about in corridors of power, not for their wealth, not for their ancient lineage, but for the simple terrifying truth that they alone placed values above price tags, lives above treaties and dignity above dominion, and she dared to hope, dared to let herself believe that she might not end as a trinket in the treasury of a foreign emperor, but as someone who could walk free beneath a sky defended by those who saw her worth not in DNA or dowry but in existence itself. Yet the council was not done, for empires did not yield easily, and one by one their voices rose again, calling Elias's bluff, insisting humanity lacked the resolve to wage a war it could not win, that his threat was suicide masked as valor, and yet outside the chamber, aboard the Resolute, Elias stood at the command deck, his hands steady over the fire control, his officers at his side ready to follow his decision even into annihilation, for they knew this was not a battle about numbers or fleets, it was about principle, and when he gave the order to charge weapons to full, every crew member's heart pounded not in fear but in unity, the unity of a species declaring to the galaxy that they would not allow injustice to dictate the terms of civilization. And back in the council hall the hum of charged cannons reverberated through the dome's glass, shaking chandeliers, cracking tiles, until the alien warlords realized that the humans would rather burn than yield, and such a calculus, incomprehensible to traders, was terrifying to behold, because a species willing to die for principle could not be bought, could not be reasoned into surrender, could not be enslaved by gold or weaponry, and in that moment the alien princess lowered her head, not in defeat, but in silent gratitude, for in all her years of captivity she had never seen such defiance in her name, never seen someone ready to stake their very existence upon her freedom, and the chamber grew colder, fear spreading like frost, until finally one of the elder counselors, his tendrils quivering, declared that the auction was suspended indefinitely, that the risk of open war outweighed the promise of profit, and the murmurs of agreement rippled swiftly after, because no one wanted to test the fury of the humans who dared to declare her priceless, and as her containment field dissolved her shackles clicking open not by generosity but by surrender, she stepped down the dais, her gaze locked on the ceiling where the dark silhouette of Earth's battleship hovered, and though she did not speak, though she did not cry out, her silence was louder than any cheer, and Elias, watching from the viewscreen aboard the Resolute, knew the battle was not yet done, that alien powers would rally, plot, and strike again to claim what they had lost. But in that moment, as the chamber fell apart and the council scattered, as the alien princess was escorted out under human guard, he allowed himself one deep breath of victory, because the galaxy had just been shown the unthinkable truth. Humanity was no longer a bystander on the galactic stage, they were a force that could not be measured in currency or colonies, but in fire, loyalty, and unshakable resolve, and their declaration that she was priceless had echoed louder than any cannon. The silence before the last storm was unlike anything Commander Marcus Hale had ever felt, for it was not silence in the literal sense but rather a heavy suspension of time, a space in which all fates hung unresolved, the alien princess standing beside him upon the command deck, her luminous presence filling the air with a fragile calm that belied the terror of what they both knew was coming, for the Galactic Council had rejected Earth's declaration, had demanded once more that the princess be handed over as property, as a bargaining chip in their endless wars, and when Earth had refused they had assembled an armada the likes of which no human fleet had ever faced, ships so vast that they blotted out entire constellations, their weapons powered by energies harvested from dying suns, and yet the humans had drawn their line and stood their ground, declaring in one unified voice that the alien princess was not for sale, not for trade, not for ransom, but was priceless and deserving of life and dignity, and so now the galaxy converged upon this single human battleship, the Resolute, a vessel no larger than a grain of sand against the endless cosmic tide but carrying within it the unbreakable will of an entire species. And Marcus stood at the center of it all, knowing that history itself balanced upon his choices in the hours to come, for if they fell then humanity would be shattered and the princess lost, but if they held then something new would be born, a fire that might burn through all tyranny. The princess turned her radiant eyes toward him then, eyes like shimmering pools of starlight, and she spoke softly though every soul on the deck leaned closer as though her words carried the weight of destiny. Marcus, you know they will not stop, they will burn your world to ash to see me caged again, do not risk your species for me. He met her gaze without hesitation, his jaw clenched in that uniquely human way that spoke of both stubbornness and conviction, and his voice, steady as steel, carried across the deck. Your life is not a risk, it is a cause worth everything, for if we trade you like they wish then we become the very monsters we fight, and humanity will never bow to that, not while I draw breath. Around them the crew rose in silent agreement, their hands tightening over consoles and controls, their hearts ignited with something no empire had ever truly understood, the sheer irrational defiance of humankind, the refusal to treat life as a currency. And in that moment the princess understood why these fragile beings from a small blue world frightened empires so vast, because they believed not in dominion but in dignity, and their battleship had become a beacon of that belief. The alien armada approached like a tide of annihilation, tens of thousands of ships locking into formation, their cannons lighting the void with ominous glow, and the communications channel erupted with voices of accusation, threats that echoed like thunder. Earth, surrender the alien princess at once, or your world will be scoured from existence. But Marcus only stood taller, pressing the channel open to broadcast not just to the attackers but to every listening ear across the galactic spectrum. We do not trade lives, we do not sell souls, and if you believe a princess can be priced then you have already lost, for to us she is priceless, and so we will fight until the void itself shatters. His words burned across the networks like wildfire, reaching slaves and soldiers, merchants and monarchs, all who had ever wondered whether humanity was just another opportunistic species or something different, and now they knew, for humanity declared without fear that worth was not measured in power but in being. The first shots came like meteors, colossal beams tearing across the void toward the Resolute, and the battleship shook as if struck by the fist of a god, but its shields held, flaring like a sunburst, and the crew roared with both fear and fury as Marcus commanded evasive maneuvers, the ship darting between enemy fire with the precision of a blade dancer, returning fire with railguns that spat tungsten rods faster than light, ripping through enemy armor with impossible accuracy. Yet it was not enough, for every enemy ship destroyed was replaced by 100 more, their endless formations surrounding the humans like a crushing noose, and the princess, watching the storm unfold, felt her heart twist with guilt, for all this blood was being spilled for her, and yet when she looked upon Marcus she saw no regret, only resolve, and she realized that this battle was not about her alone but about what she represented, the refusal of one world to bend to empires. The fight raged for hours, the Resolute battered and burning, crewmen falling at their posts but never yielding, until at last the flagship of the alien armada loomed before them, a ship the size of a moon, its cannon charging with a sphere of pure starfire, one shot that would vaporize the human battleship utterly, and all seemed lost, the bridge lit red with alarms, the crew bracing for the end, when the alien princess stepped forward and placed her hand upon the main console, her bioluminescent veins glowing like molten rivers, and she whispered words in a language older than the stars, a plea and a vow that resonated with the hidden depths of her people's forgotten legacy, and suddenly the void itself seemed to bend, for her species had once been builders of wonders, not slaves, and though her power had been caged and muted, here in the presence of humanity's defiance it awakened. Energy surged from her touch, flowing into the Resolute systems, amplifying its shields, its cannons, its very heart, until the battleship shone like a newborn star, and Marcus realized what she had done, binding her life force to the ship, risking herself so that humanity might endure, and his heart clenched with both awe and terror. With a cry that echoed across the void the Resolute unleashed its full fury, every cannon blazing, every railgun firing, its shields reflecting enemy fire back upon their own, and it plunged headlong toward the alien flagship, a single defiant spark against a mountain of darkness. The collision of forces shook entire sectors, empires watching in shock as the human ship cut through the enemy's pride with impossible brilliance, and when the light faded the alien flagship lay shattered, drifting like a carcass, its armies suddenly disoriented, their formations broken. In that instant rebellion erupted across the galaxy, oppressed species rising as one, inspired by the sight of a single human battleship declaring one life priceless and proving it with fire, and the enemy fleet began to scatter, not from defeat alone but from the terror that something new had begun, something no empire could ever cage again. On the deck of the Resolute, smoke and sparks filling the air, Marcus staggered toward the princess, who had collapsed from the strain, her glow dimming, and he fell to his knees beside her, whispering desperately, "Stay with me, you're not leaving now, not after this." Her eyes fluttered open weakly, and with the faintest smile she whispered, "You called me priceless and you meant it, now I know freedom is real." He clasped her hand as the stars themselves seemed to listen, and for the first time in her life the alien princess felt safe, not as a prize or possession but as someone cherished beyond measure. And so the war ended not with the crushing victory of empires but with the defiance of one ship, one crew, one commander, and one princess who together lit a flame that spread across galaxies, a flame declaring that no life could be traded, that dignity was beyond price, and in the centuries to come that story would be told again and again, the legend of the day when a human battleship stood against the galaxy and the universe learned that some things cannot be bought,